sorry. Oh, she's doing something. Good morning. I hope everyone here and at home are doing well today. My name's Eddie Chen. Hello? I'm Eddie Chen. I'm one of your board members here at Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalists Church, and I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the board and the program council. You're welcome here, whoever you are, wherever you're from, and wherever you are on your journey. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about our church, TVUUC, you could fill out the visitor information card that's located in the back seat pocket or the pew in front of you, and place it in the collection plate when it comes by, and someone will be in touch with you. Now, regarding COVID, gratefully, per the CDC, Knox County says our risk level remains low, which is great news. Currently, there are no COVID restrictions in place at the church, though we encourage masking and vaccinations. The Lizzie Crozier-French room is designated for remote viewing with masks required for all those over the age of 2. In addition, room A is available for families with children with masks required for all those over the age of 2 also. If you'd like to view our current COVID policy in full, you can access our church website at tvuuc.org. As we go forward together, please remember that we are each other's keeper. If you or your family are interested in the Youth Religious Education Program, please visit our education table out in the lobby. Jessica and Miriam would answer any questions that you may have. And got a couple announcements here. Patsy, are you here? Huh? Oh, here, Patsy from our 8th Principal Task Force.
All right, can you hear me? All right, as Eddie said, I'm Patsy Farmer, representing TVUUC's 8th Principal Task Force, with an invitation for each of you to our workshop, Abundant Love and the 8th Principle at the Boundaries of Our Love and Faith. It will be led by our own Reverend Duncan Teague this coming Saturday. How many of you know why I called him our own? All right, for those of you whose tenure here is more like mine, Duncan was a TVUUC ministerial intern here maybe 10 years ago. This congregation nurtured his ministry as it has many others who also became UU leaders. He took what he learned here and his studies and from his own life knowledge and founded a new congregation in Atlanta, Abundant Love, centered in the African American religious tradition. They had a wonderful 5th anniversary celebration just last Sunday. Now Duncan is circling back to nurture our implementation of the 8th Principle, which we adopted in June of 2021. It reads, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. In the workshop, we will explore and reflect on the 8th Principle, informed by what Duncan learned in guiding Abundant Love as it brought the 8th to life. TVUUC members and friends and those from neighboring UU congregations will gather in the Greg McKendry Fellowship Hall, as I said, next Saturday. I think I skipped that part. Next Saturday, the 25th, from 9 a.m. to 1:15 p.m. Doors will open at 8:15 with light refreshments. Unfortunately, the deadline for childcare has passed, but let us know by Tuesday, the 21st, if you want to have lunch provided. You can sign up for the workshop using the link in the newsletter, the Facebook event, or the website, or talk with a member of the 8th Principal Task Force. So any other 8th Principal Task Force members, would you stand up or raise your hands? Chloe and Eddie. Mark. All right, let one of us know. And just another couple of comments. The 8th Principal Task Force thanks the Endowment Fund for its generous grant, which allows us to hold this workshop. We hope you will join us.
Thank you, Patsy. Now we have Mark Mahundro from the Reproductive Justice Task Force.
Good morning. I'm Mark Mahundra. I'm co-chair of the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church's Reproductive Justice Task Force, and just wanted to invite anyone who's interested in being involved with that. We are having a meeting at 12:30 after this church. It'll be in the Lizzie Crozier-French room, which is on your right if you're going out the front door, if you're not familiar with the church layout. We're going to be discussing how to go possibly to Planned Parenthood's Lobby Day on the Hill, March 21st. They're going to have transportation. We're also going to be discussing possible responses to the imminent ban of one of the medical abortion pills, RU486. More than likely by the end of the month or beginning of next month, it will be banned nationwide. I can tell you more about that if you want to come to the meeting, or you can try and track me down and I can give you more information about that. But all of you are welcome, and we'll have light snacks and hope to see you there. All right, take care.
All right, thank you, Mark. Please join us for coffee and conversation after the service in the fellowship hall. Those of you online are invited to join our virtual coffee hour. Now, please silence your electronic devices as we enter into worship together.
Good morning. We're going to reverse the positions of the musical meditation and the offertory. So this will be the Ukrainian national anthem played by Cynthia Crosby-Myers.
Good morning. I'm Suzanne Brown, a member here at this church, and I have our opening words by Betts Winnicky. As we gather together this morning, may we learn to recognize and affirm the pieces of possibility, the bits of good we bring. May we encourage rather than control, love rather than possess, enable rather than envy, allowing our individual gifts to weave a patchwork of peace, the soft, deep blue of sensitivity and understanding, the red energy of creativity, the white heat of convictions, the risky, fragile green of new growth, the golden flashes of gratitude, the warm rose of love. Each of us is indispensable if we are to minister to a broken and wounded world. Together, in our gathered diversity, we form the whole. So be it.
I invite you to join together in our chalice lighting hymn, which is in your hymnal. It's number 398. It is the poetry of William Blake, of which more will be said later. Join together in our opening hymn 17 in the gray hymnal, Every Night and Every Morn.
Good morning. It is good to be gathered here this morning in all the ways we gather here in this sanctuary, watching from the Lizzie Crozier-French room or from home. Welcome. So I have a story to share this morning, which is an adaptation of a story that some of us who've been around for a little longer than others of us might be a little bit familiar with, or it might be new for many of us. It's a story called There's No Such Thing as a Dragon. Can anybody guess what might be in this story? Yeah. Well, we'll see. It starts with a kid named Billy. And when Billy woke up one morning, he was very surprised to see in his room with him a dragon. It was a very small dragon. It was about the size of a kitten. It seemed like a friendly dragon, so he patted on its head and it wagged its tail happily. And Billy ran downstairs to tell his grandma about it, and she said, "Billy, there's no such thing as a dragon." And she said it like she meant it. So Billy went back upstairs and was getting ready for the day, getting his clothes on and getting his teeth brushed. And the dragon was still there, wagging its tail, but Billy didn't pat it on the head, because if there's no such thing as something, it's silly to pat it on the head, isn't it? He went downstairs for breakfast, where his grandma had been making some pancakes. Does anyone here like pancakes? And the dragon jumped up on the table. And every pancake that Billy's grandma put on the table for Billy to eat, the dragon gobbled it up. Now, Billy's grandma didn't say anything, because if there's no such thing as something, you can't really tell it to get off the table. She just started making more pancakes. But for all the pancakes she put down, the dragon gobbled them all up. And as it turned out, Billy only got one pancake out of the whole deal. But he decided he wasn't really that hungry anyway. By now, it was bigger, though. It was kind of straining the table. It was at least as big as a medium-sized dog now. Well, he went to go back upstairs to brush his teeth, and it followed him, and he still didn't pat it on the head or anything, but by the time he came out into the hallway again, it kind of filled up the hallway, and he had to kind of squeeze around past it. Well, that morning, everything Billy and his grandma tried to do, the dragon got in the way. It got bigger and bigger and bigger. When they tried to play a game in the living room, they couldn't really, because one of its legs was kind of filling up the room by now. And when they tried to do some vacuuming upstairs, its head and neck was all the way through. And by about lunchtime, the dragon filled the entire house. And Billy said, "Gee, I didn't know dragons could grow so fast." And his grandma said, "Billy, there's no such thing as a dragon." Well, the dragon took a nap, and when it woke up, it was pretty hungry. Now, how many of us have ever seen or eaten food from a food truck? A food truck happened to drive down the road where their house was, and the dragon, when it woke up, it was pretty hungry, and it smelled the really good food in that food truck. Does anybody have a favorite kind of food that you like? What kind of food do you like? Thai food? Anybody else have a favorite kind of food? Pizza. Anybody else? Sushi. That food truck was a Thai pizza sushi food truck, and the dragon didn't think it had ever smelled anything that smelled so good, so it got up and it started to chase the food truck down the road. And of course, by this time, the dragon was so big that the house went with it, kind of like a shell on the back of a snail. Now, the postal carrier was coming down the street, ready to deliver to mail to Billy's house, and he saw the house rush past him. So he started to try and chase it, because he really wanted to deliver that mail. It was his job, but he couldn't catch it. Later that day, Billy's mom came home from work and was rather surprised to see that the house was not where it had been before. Luckily, a neighbor was able to point her in the direction that it had gone. So she jumped in her car and drove around until she saw a house that looked kind of familiar. And sure enough, there were Billy and his grandma waving from an upstairs window. And Billy's mom said, "How did this happen?" And Billy said, "Oh, it was the dragon." And Billy's grandma, what do you think she started to say? "There's no such," and Billy interrupted her and said, "There is so a dragon, and it's really big." And he patted that dragon on the head. And pretty soon, even faster than it had grown, that dragon started to shrink again. And before long, it was back down to the size of a kitten. And Billy's grandma said, "Well, you know, I don't really mind a dragon when it's that size. I wonder why it got so big." And Billy said, "Well, I don't know, but I think maybe it just wanted to be noticed." And that was the story of Billy and the dragon that did not exist. And that is our story for this morning. And now our learners and leaders who are heading to our RE spaces are going to head out as we share the recessional. Thank you.
May your mind be open to new learning. May your lips bring truth into the world. May your heart know love as you grow in joy and peace.
A reading from the book of Mark. Jesus restores a demon-possessed man. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw a man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region.
One of the things I always find interesting about that story is when the man is at peace, everyone else becomes upset. It's like when he's healed, it unsettles the whole community. So this is a prayer for healing and a prayer for peace. And it's a prayer in the language of first person. So I want you to enter into silence and invite you to close your eyes and think of these words in first person as your words. Let me find peace within, so that I may be calm throughout. Let me find silence within, so that I may find compassion throughout. Let me be reminded that some things are worth waiting for. Let me be reminded that the journey is more important than reaching the destination. Let me see that the non-doing is as much a part of life as the doing. Let me be reminded that it is in these moments of holding on that I can find quietude and renewal. It is within these times of inaction that I can find rest. It is in these times of emptiness that I can become full. Amen. Now we'll have our joys and concerns.
Can I get an amen? Good morning and welcome to everyone here in the sanctuary and to everyone watching the live stream. Today our thoughts and prayers are with Carol Villaverde, whose brother Richard Bailey is in the hospital, and the family is in conversations about hospice and palliative care. Carol is very close to her brother, who gave her away at her wedding. We are surrounding her with love. Our thoughts and prayers are with Faye Joyce, whose sister Helen Wicks died this week at the age of 90. We are holding her in the light. And our thoughts and prayers are with Joe and Mary Touchton, who are mourning the loss of Joe's son, Christopher Tophy Touchton. Christopher grew up in our church, and his ashes will be placed in our memorial garden next to his mother's. Christopher will be remembered for his satirical wit, his abundant energy, and irrepressible enthusiasm. A memorial service is being planned to be held here at TVUC in the near future. We celebrate with Matthew Blondell, who will be starting a new job with Second Harvest Food Bank. Matthew tells us, "I am excited and humbled to be able to make a difference for people in the area and to be working for such an amazing organization that is fighting food insecurity across the region." Mindful of these joys and concerns, those spoken and those that remain unspoken, we send love and light out into the world.
We are sending you light to heal you, to hold you. We are sending you light to hold you in love. We are sending you light to heal you, to hold you. We are sending you light to hold you in love.
You may notice a theme that more than one of our hymns is from the poetry of William Blake, and that continues. With this next hymn, I invite you to sing together, "Can I See Another's Woe," 127, in your gray hymnal.
Can I see another's woe and not be in sorrow too? Can I see another's grief and not seek for kind relief? Can I see a falling tear and not feel my sorrow share? Can a father see his child weep, nor be with sorrow filled? Can a mother sit and hear infant groan in infant fear? No, no, never can it be. Never, never can it be.
In January, Chris announced that we were enjoying the 26th year in this building. And that memory caused me to think about the financial part of getting to this space. During this time of the stewardship campaign, it seems fitting to reminisce just a little about what we went through to get from our little building down the pike to our present spacious, light-filled home. I had the privilege of chairing the Building Design Committee and worked closely with Julie Harden, who was in charge of the Capitol campaign. Julie and Pat had hoped to be here today, but they had to cancel because of health concerns. The building story is a fascinating chapter in our church history, but that's a talk for another day. Just one piece of that history is relevant for our current fundraising. The campaign target was an ambitious $1 million, hardly a realistic goal for a group with an annual budget of $211,000. But in those exhilarating days, when we also recognized that we simply had outgrown our space, we just went for it. Keep in mind that on top of the capital budget, we also pledged to maintain our current giving for 2 years. When we reached $888,000 and thought we had exhausted all of our resources, some among us considered scaling down our ambition. We even spent time with the architect debating whether we built a sanctuary or a fellowship hall. Think about it. Potlucks in here or worship services in our fellowship hall. Then Julie stepped in with determination to reach our $1 million goal. And guess what? An angel donor made a $100,000 gift and another $100,000 interest-free loan for 5 years. And that was the boost we needed. Thanks to Julie's persistence and the help of a wonderful committee, including Frony, we raised $1,274,000. At the time, I called it the UU version of a miracle. I still do think that. I know that Julie still regrets that we weren't able to build all the architect had designed, several classrooms and a chapel down on the southern end of the building. Maybe someday we'll have the will to complete the project, and we'll do it in Julie's honor. The relevance of our fundraising legacy is that what we're doing now is maintaining that 26-year-old investment that our fellow members made, and many made great sacrifices to do it. I know it's not as sexy to raise money for things such as the KUB bill, staff salaries, and maintenance on our building and grounds, but it is every bit as important. So I invite you, if you haven't done so, to pledge, consider raising your pledge, to recognize the value of our congregational life to you personally and for future generations, and to be as generous as you are able. Thank you. Amen. Amen. May I have an amen?
Ways that you can give to support the work of Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church are listed in the order of service. You can consult them. The Reverend Renee Kessler, President and CEO of the Beck Cultural Exchange Center, wanted to be here today. This is a Share the Plate Sunday. We will be splitting the plate between this congregation and the Beck Center. But her doctor said, you stay home, take your medicines, cure that cough. So you don't get to hear from a good Baptist preacher, and it's okay to say, oh. But let me say a few things about the Beck Center. First of all, this congregation and the Beck Center share some DNA. The founding executive director of the Beck Center is Bob Booker. Bob Booker, in his college student days and shortly thereafter, was a member of this congregation. In later years, 2 or 3 careers later, he founded the Beck Center. And the Beck Center and we lost somebody we cherish on December 31st, Irvin Williams, who was a board member of the Beck Center. So, the Beck Center, it's much more than the Knoxville and East Tennessee repository for Black history and culture. The Beck Center has present engagements. For example, last Friday, there was a public gathering to talk about that incident at McAllister's Deli and ask, what can we do going forward to ensure justice? It was a very informative and energizing meeting. That's the kind of thing that the Beck Center does, not to reside in the past, but to carry past energy forward into our future. So, if you want to support the Beck Center in its treatment of history and its service as a major resource in remembering urban removal, if you want to continue it as a meeting place for many vital organizations, and if you want to support our congregation, give generously. Thank you.
funny thing happened to me on the way to a funeral. This is a true story from my teenage years when I was traveling with my family in a car on the way to a funeral, and we were driving through downtown Macon, Georgia, with its tall buildings and tall hotels and traffic. And I looked down a side street and I saw a cow. But just as soon as I saw it, we were past that street. So I just got a glimpse of it. And I turned to my family and said, I just saw a cow in the middle of the street in downtown. And my sister Marianne said very patiently, she said, Chris, when people are grieving, they sometimes see things that aren't there. Well, I didn't want to make an issue of it because we were grieving and we were on our way to a memorial service, and it seemed like there were more important things to debate or discuss in the car at the time. So I just let it lie there. And then the next morning, on the front cover of the newspaper was a picture of a cow in the middle of the street in downtown Macon, Georgia. It was the cow had apparently escaped from the Middle Georgia Fair and wandered into the city. And the photo made it not only in the local paper, but in the Atlanta paper and I think paper all across the country. So I was very careful to make sure that my sister saw the morning paper that morning. I share that story because this morning I want to talk about the rational mind, and I want to talk about the ways the rational mind may or may not help us be in touch with reality. In elementary school, I was taught to memorize a poem, and maybe your teacher gave you the same assignment to memorize The Purple Cow. It goes, I never saw a purple cow. I never hope to see one. But I can tell you anyhow, I'd rather see than be one. Like the poet, I've never seen a purple cow, and my rational mind convinces me that I'm very unlikely to ever see one. But I have seen an ordinary cow in extraordinary circumstances, and that helps keep me humble. There's a song that Waylon Jennings used to sing that has the line, I've always been crazy, but it's kept me from going insane. Indeed, sometimes when we're in touch with reality, other people may think we're crazy. Last week I was talking with Morgan Wilson, who came by to donate books for our used book sale. Morgan doesn't circulate in public very much these days because she has a rare form of blood cancer and has to be very careful about blood clotting. She said to me, as she was wearing her mask, she said, Chris, I'm a very rational person. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in astrology. But when I go out in public wearing my mask, people treat me like I'm the COVID crazy lady. She's not alone. My wife, Suzanne, is immunocompromised. Mark Mahundro, a member of our staff, is immunocompromised. Reverend John Coffey, our community minister, is immunocompromised. I could go on and on. But Morgan says it's hard to be an outlier. Sometimes being very rational about the science of science of disease means other people will think we are crazy. Now, when I asked Morgan if I could quote her, she said with a smile, sure, you can use my name unless you think the astrologist will come after me. And it's true, in the Unitarian Universalist Church, we include those who believe in astrology and those who do not, those who believe in God and those who do not. And when I try to explain how I can be a minister to such a church, to the larger community, they sometimes look at me like I'm crazy. Our rationality and our sanity are connected, but sometimes not exactly the way we think. Indeed, I've been known to make the argument that sanity is the last acceptable way to escape from reality. I got an amen, I think. Our sanity is often based on limiting the amount of reality that we let into our lives. This week I was talking with someone who told me they were going on a media fast. Have you ever been on a media fast where you just turn off the TV, turn off the radio, unplug the computer? Because 24/7 information about every mass shooting, every earthquake, every bombing, every hurricane, every drone strike, every flood, every hate crime, every pandemic, everything, letting everything in can be more than we can handle and stay sane. We have to screen out parts of reality for our own mental health. And sometimes when we screen out parts of reality, we screen out parts of ourselves. I was once serving another church in another town when someone came up to me, a man who is very passionate, and he said, "I'm tired of your emotional sermons. I want logical sermons. I want rational sermons." And I had to resist the temptation to say, "There's no need to get emotional about it." But I can identify him because we're not only thinking creatures, we're feeling creatures. And I can relate to that. Rationality is a part of who we are. And I often think about that story where Jesus approaches the demon-possessed man. Rationality is a part of who we are, but it's not all of who we are. When Jesus approaches that man and says, "What is your name?" he says, "I am Legion, for we are many." We are many. Rationality is part of who we are, but we are all legion. In addition to reason, we contain what the Buddhists call the afflicted emotions: anger, bitterness, resentment, avarice, jealousy, envy, guilt, fear, and hate. If we try to repress our emotions, we will often erupt and take it out on other people. Have you ever known someone who is nice in person but could send you a nasty email or a flame of a text? It's not enough to appreciate our rational minds. We have to be able to understand our rational minds and our demons. I think one of the reasons the Beck Cultural Exchange Center exists, and I think one of the reasons our 8th Principal Task Force exists, is try to exorcise the demon of racism from within ourselves and our culture, to get it out so that we can be healed. On more than one level, I can relate to the angry man demanding more logical and rational sermons, because I too prize reason. I agree with William Ellery Channing, who founded the American Unitarian Church, who said reason is essential, that we should no more abandon the use of our mind for thinking than we abandon the use of our eyes for seeing, or our ears for hearing, or our feet for walking around on the earth. Reason is an important part of our human nature. It is an important part of our religious tradition as Unitarian Universalists, so much so that one satirist once suggested that when Unitarian Universalists get together for church on Sunday morning, we sing, "Oh, what a friend we have in reason." Of course, sometimes our rationality creates more problems than it solves, as when the person rewrote the old children's song, "If you're happy and you know it, overthink. If you're happy and you know it, overthink. If you're happy and you know it, give your brain a chance to blow it. If you're happy and you know it, overthink." Indeed, our tendency to overthink, our tendency to take rationalism to an extreme is at the heart of addictions. This is something that the scientists who study addiction say. It's often like taking rationality too far is a part of what leads to addiction and eating disorders and compulsive behaviors and depression. Psychologists warn us that we have to ensure that our rational brains do not become too efficient, too meticulous, too fastidious, and too exacting. Indeed, this is at the heart of the practice of meditation, to quiet our thinking and our overthinking, to rest from the hard work of being a human thinking in order to become a human being. Whenever I look at a painting by Vincent van Gogh like Starry Night, I'm struck by how the beauty of the painting contrasts with the extreme pain of his personal existence as an artist. And by many measures, Van Gogh was not a sane man. He checked himself into an asylum in order to receive help. He did not screen out the horrors of existence, but neither did he screen out the beauty. Many people do not know this, but during his lifetime, he only sold one painting. And he wrote of himself, "What am I in the eyes of most people? A non-entity, an eccentric, or an unpleasant person. Somebody who has no position in society and will never have. In short, the lowest of the low. All right then, even if that were absolutely true, then I should one day like to show by my work that such an eccentric, such a nobody has in his heart. That is my ambition, based less on resentment than on love in spite of everything, based more on feeling of serenity than on passion. Though I am often in the depths of misery, there is still a calmness and a purity and a pure harmony and music inside of me." As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm the use of reason, but we also want to make sure that our rationality doesn't become so fine-tuned that it blocks out the harmony and the music that is within each one of us. I once served in a program for the chronically mentally ill, and there was a patient in that program who could not communicate well with words. You could not understand what he had to say, but when he sat down at the piano, you could hear the music in him. And the music inside of him became music that the world could hear. The music we've been singing today has been written around the poetry of William Blake. William Wordsworth once had this to say about his fellow poet, William Blake. He wrote, "There is no doubt that this poor man is mad. But there is something in the madness of this man which interests me more than the sanity of Lord Byron or Walter Scott." What is remarkable about the poetry of William Blake is that he invites us to see the world in a new way. And indeed, his poetry is so full of imagery, so rich and packed with imagery, we often feel like we need to screen some of it out in order to be able to understand the whole of what he has to say. As William Blake taught us, when the doors of perception are cleansed, we shall see everything as it is, infinite. And he invited us to see the world in a grain of sand, and heaven in a wildflower, and infinity in the palm of our hands, and eternity in an hour. He reminded us that everything that lives is holy, and that all deities reside in the human breast. And it is only our mind-forged manacles that keep us from seeing life this way. Our mind-forged manacles keep us from the beauty and the truth and love all around us and inside of us. He wrote, "In your bosom you bear your heaven and earth, And all you behold, though it appears without, it is within. The angels are not up there. They're in here. The demons are not down there. They're in here. But William Blake was not content to have us look for heaven only in our palm, but to see it in the face of another person, to see it in the face of a stranger, to see it in the face of a person of another faith, to see it in the face of a person of another race, to see it in the face of an outlier. He wrote, "To mercy, pity, peace, and love all pray in their distress, and to these virtues of delight return their thankfulness. And all must love the human form in heathen, Turk, or Jew. Where mercy, love, and pity dwell, there God is dwelling too." In the way that society measures sanity and insanity, a scientist in a laboratory working on weapons of mass destruction is sane. But a poet that sees the divinity in every living thing is insane. And maybe it's the reverse. Maybe it's the opposite. The bombs that are being dropped on the Ukraine were designed by very rational people. And many other weapons of mass destruction are being designed by very rational people, biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons. Should this kind of rationality have the last word? Or should we pay attention to the artists and the poets and the people society thinks are crazy? Which brings me back to that cow in the middle of the road in downtown Macon, Georgia, with all the cars honking because it's blocking the way. In Hinduism, a cow is considered a sacred animal, an idea that is considered irrational in many other faith traditions. Of course, there are 1.2 billion Hindus in the world, so it's an idea that no one can ignore, even if inclined to do so. All I know is this: I've never seen a purple cow. And because of that, I can claim to have some small link to my rationality and my sanity. But I have seen an ordinary cow in extraordinary circumstances. And I've listened to the poets who tell us that everything that lives is holy. And so I am inclined to be respectful of other people's truth claims, even if they fall outside the boundaries of my own rational thinking. For Shakespeare may have gotten it right. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. So be it. I invite you to join together in our closing hymn, "May Nothing Evil Cross This Door," hymn 1 in the Gray Hymnal.
May
TVUC, you are kind of crazy. Prophetic Church, the world awaits your liberating ministry. Go forward in the power of love, proclaim the truth that makes us free. Entertaining angels unaware. As our last act of worship, I invite you to turn and greet your neighbor.
No.